Friends and comrades, welcome to Student Federation of India's virtual book release or virtual report release. We have seen that from the first wave of corona which has hit the country, there had been different issues that we are facing. Of course, we have seen the migrant workers crisis. Of course, we are seeing people being jobless. Of course, we have seen the health crisis that has followed the second wave. But along with that, also one thing that we have been facing, we are seeing is a Comrade Shivdasan is here. Welcome, comrade. So, as we are telling, we are seeing that the student community at large and education system at large had been affected by this pandemic much worsely. We are seeing the high dropout rates. We are seeing a woman getting married at very early age. We are also seeing with the pushing by the government of the online education, of the blended mode of education, the digital divide which already existed in India is expanding. And more people from the marginalized community, from the poorer section, from the working class family are falling out of our educational system. So, from Student Federation of India, we thought we are going to do a thorough, detailed analysis of whatever the data available and try to give a clear image to the people and also to the government that how pushing of blended mode of education, which the UGC is proposing now, is going to affect the student community, how the pandemic has affected a large amount of students coming from the working class and the marginalized background, and how we all, as a student community, as citizen of this country, can give a way forward to solve all this problem. So on that, we have tried to create or we tried to make our report by the Indian researcher, which is a research wing of Student Federation of India Central Executive Committee. For our today's program, we have Comrade VP Sanu, All India President SFI. We have Comrade Mayuk Bishwas, All India General Secretary. We have Comrade Nitish Narayan, the editor of Student Struggle and also the Central Secretariat member. And we are really happy to have Comrade V. Siddhasan with us. He had been our former president, our All India president, and this Indian researcher, the journal that we are publishing today, he was the former editor of this journal also. So we'll also learn something about how during his time he maintained the journal, why it is important that from Student Federation of India, we also intervene ourselves into academic issue. And we have Comrade Shoham Bhattacharya as the representative of our research associate, the people who have worked day and night to make sure that we have some concrete document to present in front of people. Shoham is a research scholar in ISI. Along with that, there were many other comrades and associates who were working. We had Devdeep pursuing his PhD in data science from Rome. We have Torsha, a PhD scholar from IFLU, who had helped us in making sure that all the drafting is correct and everything. We had Comrade Hitesh from TIS. We had Comrade Amrita and Comrade Noor from Pondicherry University and IIT Gandhinagar. It's very unfortunate that all of us could not come today, but I think Shoham is going to broadly talk about how we have made the report and what are our key findings. So I'm not going to extend my monologue anymore. I would request Comrade Siddhasan to take the stage now to talk about how Indian researcher during your time work, what is the current condition of student, and also as you are also intervening in the parliament about some student issue, if you can also talk about that. Over to you, Comrade Shivdasan. Comrade, you have to unmute. You are still muted. No.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Dear comrades, Sanu, Mayuk, and Nitish, now this is a very happiest moment because Indian researcher, one of the very important, my concern, this is a very important journal for the student community in research field. In the future, the academic community will accept the importance of this journal because this is the Indian researcher. The things are organized by the student community for the student community. So this is an important journal for the student community. Now we are facing an unusual situation because of the coronavirus and COVID-19. Here, the lot of discussion is going on regarding the pandemic and the pandemic time education system. So the pandemic has already affected the all activities of living beings in the world. So the international organizations like UN and government organizations everywhere, they they have made their own mechanism for managing the pandemic. So here, the face of the world has changed. In addition to the atmosphere of politics and family, this pandemic has not only affected the science and social science, but also the subject of theology. Therefore, the basic character of every field of life, especially the higher education and research, are being threatened by this virus. Also, the policies of the government at the time of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 issue. It will negatively impact the collateral works and calls for support and collaboration in the research field. We know this is a time for more international cooperation and joint actions for the protection of the humanity. The higher education sector and the research sector, the post-COVID world is a topic of It's very important topic for the discussion. Education and research are closely linked with the character of the ruling class that we know. The present system of education was developed through the long years of social interventions. The history should not be overlooked. At the time of outbreak of COVID-19, the higher education institutions in the world closed their own door for on-campus education. We had a lot of experience from Stanford University, Beijing University, and Washington. There we are getting the lot of experiences. So also in India, we are facing a lot of threats to the offline education. And these private sector universities and private players in the field of education, they are only promoting, now they are trying to promote their own online education sector. So, and recently an article published in an international journal says the higher education is everywhere segmented and differentiated with the public and private institutions with vastly differing resources serve different needs. This is true within countries and across borders. Same kind of situation exists everywhere and it is slightly different from states to states. The successful development of modern education system, in fact, marks a turning point in the history of exploitation of the lower class, caste, and the woman. It tells thousands untold stories across the world. The Indian researcher will take the initiative for telling the story, for share the stories to the student community and the society. In education sector, we are facing various problems being faced due to the pandemic. Administrative problems, the lack of employees, and these all things are there. Financial crisis because of the policies of the government at the time during the time of the pandemic we are facing, especially the third world countries, including India. Generally, the allotment to the education sector is in very bad shape. India is spending only less than 3% of GDP in education sector. SFI made a lot of campaigns on this issue. The communication and control system by which teaching is managed by people are absent. Lacks of skilled persons for replacing them, another serious issue. And another increasing inequality or incredible inequality, that things also here in the discussion field. The National Sample Data Survey data in 2007 and 18 revealed that only 42% of urban and 50% of rural household had internet access. and only 34% of urban and 11% of rural persons had used the internet in the past 30 days. So another thing is that the higher education today is unthinkable without some of the computer and same mode of digital data transmission. The census 2011 tells us that 71% of households with three or more members are dwelling with two rooms or less. 74% in rural and 64% in urban. You can compare this data. The impact of smartphone capabilities and stability of net connectivity on open education pedagogy also needs to be examined. Here, the discussion everywhere we are hearing online versus offline or distant versus face-to-face education. But a real problem is the policies of the government, the poor versus the corporate world. This is the real issue here. So, dear comrades, I am requesting to you here, the Student Federation of India needs to take very important role for protecting the interest of the poorest of the poor people in the nation. Here, everywhere, democratic forces, peasants organizations, workers organizations, together they are fighting. In Jantar Mantar, now the peasants are conducting the struggle. Their peasant parliament is going there, and all over the nation, women's organizations are protecting with their own issues. So across the nation, the struggle is going on. So Student Federation of India and the Indian researcher should play a major role in this struggle. Dear comrades, I salute you, everybody. With the permission of all comrades, I am releasing your Indian researcher, the journal of the researchers, the journal of the student community in our nation. Thank you, comrades. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you so much. As Comrade Shivdasan had told it, that there is some responsibility that we as student, we as researcher have towards the society, and I hope this is the first step towards that. We all saw that document what Comrade Shivdasan published during when he was the editor, and it had really great articles of really eminent people. We are starting with a report, but we hope very soon we are also will be able to come up with a proper journal copy where we can also see some eminent people writing, and we'll also request Comrade Shivdasan to write an article about the current situation in education and what should be our way forward. Thank you so much to Comrade Shivdasan for giving us the time, finding time during his schedule. The parliament is already on, Comrade was inside, but still he was able to manage some time for us. We are really, really thankful to Comrade Shivdasan. Thank you so much. I now would ask Comrade Soham. I think Comrade Shivdasan also can listen to some of the findings on something what Comrade was also telling about the NSSO data.
Sure, Comrade, sure. I will be here. I will be here.
So I would request Comrade Soham to take the show from now and present some of the key discussion or the key finding that we have found out in the. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Comrade Dikshita. Greetings to comrades present here, Comrade Shivdasan, Comrade Mayuk Biswas, Comrade Sanu, and Comrade Nitish, and to others who are joining us through Facebook Live. And this report, as Comrade Shivdasan might have hinted already, and Comrade Dikshita have already told about what Indian research is. This report is largely going to be about. I would briefly take you through the report and what work Indian researcher has taken up. And this is the first report after the pandemic that we are bringing. So I'll just briefly, as I'm not as well versed with the others in this panel as a public speaker, so I'll take a help of this presentation here. So before we entered this pandemic or a subsequent lockdown, there's an ongoing debate that was going on in terms of the policy environment that we were living in. Since 1991, there was a shift whether education is a right or education is a saleable commodity. So the lockdown has created crisis of lives as well as of livelihoods. Most of the poorest sections of the working class have lost their job. And in between, in terms of our educational policy, there's been a change. A new educational policy of 2019 draft has been now made into a practice in the 2020, and which essentially, talks about certain in certain spheres. It emphasizes on the privatization. It talks about user fee in pursuing further education in India. And at that juncture, if we are trying to ask three major questions in this report, that if the schools are locked down, if there is a strict lockdown in place for students to access schools and colleges, is there a digital divide? The correct answer, of course, is available to us in public sphere and elsewhere, is that there is, of course, digital divide. We are trying to understand what is the extent or how wide is this digital divide. Second, that after the first wave of COVID pandemic and the first set of lockdowns, is there any incidence of forced dropout that we are seeing or forced non-enrollment we are seeing? And finally, coming back to the first question that we were dealing with, that are we or is Indian state treating education as a public good anymore, or is it something that is becoming more and more sellable commodity, and in times of crisis that is helping our government in order to push our policy environment towards that? So before going into the part of the report, I'll briefly introduce where we are standing in terms of international comparison. So the Human Development Ranking that is provided by UN, that gives us two broad parameters. So our rank is 129 in 2018. So in terms of Scandinavian country, Norway, which is ranking first, our average years of schooling is even just half of it, if we can observe. And expected years of schooling is something that should concern us, that in India, who is entering the education now, or who is enrolling now in 2000, or at least in 2018, who were enrolling, they were expected to have at least 12 years of education, given the current level of life expectancy, given the current level of enrollment or rate of enrollment that was ongoing. When we compare that with, say, China, which is just above in the development ranking to us, is something we lag by at least 2 years. And Vietnam, with which we come in the same development category of medium level of human development, there also we are lacking by at least a few months. So, and as Comrade Sivadesan have pointed out, the attitude of governments towards higher education in India, for at least for the current regime that we are in, political regime that we are in, that has also not been very promising, because our gross enrollment ratio, if we see that the participation rate in higher education, that shows an increasing trend over the years, at least in the last 5 years. However, we do not see any increase in the share of the total budget expenditure, particularly in higher education. So there are two things at hand before the pandemic even hit us. One, that our expected years of schooling, if someone is entering the education sector now, was not promising in terms of the international picture. And secondly, the spending in higher education, which often promotes inclusivity in education, which often encourages one to participate in education, that is also not very promising in the pre-pandemic situation. So now we come to the first question at hand, that if there is a digital divide, how wide is it and who suffers the most? Now, to explain what digital divide is or how we are treating this in our report, we're taking three particular definitions here. One, certainly, which is the most popular definition, that you need to have uninterrupted access to a smartphone or a laptop or any devices with internet to participate in the classroom. There are two more aspects to participation in digital classroom, which is less discussed. One is that in a digital classroom, you need to have certain training as a teacher and as a student in order to participate, because there is a certain pedagogical shift that we need to make. we do not have the same physical class. So there's a need of training in the method of learning as well as in teaching, whether that is available. And finally, if we are treating, as Comrade Shivadasan already mentioned once, that we, like 2011 census gives us that availability of enough rooms are even an issue in the Indian context. So if along with that, if there are home-based assistants, like do we have enough number of members who can assist us, because we cannot go to schools and colleges in order to access the physical classroom. So we are defining that lack of availability of any three of these criteria can be part of the digital divide. And so before we enter the NSS, the pandemic, the NSS 2017-18 survey on the household social consumption of education suggests that rural and urban India combined, only around 16% or 15% of the households in India had access to computer. Roughly around 28% of the households had any access to internet. Here, internet means that both computer and your smartphones. So 72% of households.
So I'm sorry to disturb. You can share the screen now.
Yeah, I have.
It's not showing.
Is it not coming?
No. That's why I thought I'll just interrupt you, because we can't see the screen.
Give me a sec. Yeah, I thought I have started the screen sharing.
Wait. I don't think it's there. Check once.
Has it started?
Not showing.
Give me a second, Dipshit.
Check now. Or it's okay. We can, anyway, we can understand whatever you're saying. We can follow it up.
The numbers too also. Maybe now.
Not yet, but let me try once.
Shoham, you can continue. You can continue.
Okay.
You don't need to show.
Okay, Shom can continue.
Dipshit, you had presentation also, if you can share from your screen, and yeah, that would also do. I'll stop my screen share.
You're muted, Dipshita.
Shom, you can speak. I'll do it in between.
Okay.
I'm giving you the solo layout. Speak.
Sure. So okay. I was hoping that the screen share was on, but to start with, that again.
So
only,
you turn on the camera.
Sure. Yeah. Something.
No problem. Yeah.
So, and also, I mean, this, as I was telling, the lack of access to digital means of education, which is worrisome, because among the there's only 13% of households had any access to internet in this 2017-18 reports, and for Dalit households it is around 24% of the households. So if in general we are seeing that only 28% of the total households had access, that is skewed again by the social and economic identities of these households. So after this lockdown happened, there's one publicly available data source that we have used in this report, and where we are seeing that, and which is done by this NGO Pratham. So the ASER, our annual survey of education report, that was undertaken in September 2020. They had done a survey roughly around 59,200 children who come around 5 to 16 years of age, and also covers teacher and household respondents. So, using that survey, we are seeing that even
Moyuda, I think your mic is on. You have to turn it off.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Sean.
no problem. Around 40% of the students who were enrolled during the lockdown had no smartphone access. So we started with around 70% of non-access, and now roughly about 40% still doesn't have any smartphone in their households. And finally, there are 45% households who have only one smartphone in their house, only one smartphone. Which means that we are, firstly, we are faced with no access, or the first parameter that we are seeing is of no access. And second, even those with access have only one smartphone in the household, which means that maybe the head of the household or someone with work will be accessing that. And therefore, what we know as digital divide has largely been widened during this first wave of lockdown. The second part is that in this survey also the parents were asked whether the students whether they did receive learning material from school, and if not, what is the reason behind that. So around 1 out of 4 parents from the government schools and roughly 1 out of 5 parents from the private schools reported that the reason being there is no smartphone in the household. 1 out of 10 parents reported that there is no internet that is working in this. So this is what digital divide, particularly in the broader term or the essential term that it means. However, the 2 other criteria that we were taking, that needs some serious policy intervention and discussion among academics and activists. First is that our teachers or the school respondents who are sending materials or taking classes, they trained enough. So the ASER 2020 survey, which was done in September to October, shows that only 50% of school teachers who are now completely into digital mode of teaching have received at all India level. Of course, be better in some states such as Kerala, but in some at all India level, only 50% of the teachers received any training, and among roughly around 70% got only brief written instructions given to them that how to send materials through WhatsApp or how to send materials in video format, something like so. There is no rigorous training of teachers, which is again a point of concern for everyone who is associated within the education sector. And finally, the part that we are seeing, that is there enough assistance within the household in terms of learning assistance? What we observe is that students whose parents level of education is below primary level or below class 5, 45% of them had no help during the first wave or first lockdown, had no help in learning at home. Whereas this number is reduced with betterment of parental education and so on and so forth. So which means with 3 usual parameters that we had defined for ourselves, that in terms of access, one had no access to smartphones during September 2020 or 21, roughly after the first 6 months of lockdown. In terms of teachers training, 1 out of 2 teachers had no training. And in terms of assistance at home, 45% of the rural school students whose parents had low educational attainment had no learning assistance at home. And still, we do not see any policy level intervention, neither from the ruling dispensation at states or neither at the center, there to address such issues and what meaning of blended mode of education that we are promoting. The second part is the second part of it that we wanted to understand after this. So what happens if digital divide widens during this lockdown? So one particular finding from this report that we are getting is there are 2 particular scenarios that is emerging out of it. One, which is necessarily important for the age group of 6 to 10 years of students, where we are seeing earlier during 2018-19, roughly around 3 students out of 100 were dropping out during this age group, who are school-going age group. So during we are taking the average from 2015 to 19, and we are seeing that roughly around 3 students were dropping out, which has now become around 6 during the 2020 survey of ASAT in rural India, which has just doubled. And the reason that is cited in the report and elsewhere in other surveys is that the schools were closed. Those who were supposed to join for the first time in their schooling did not get the opportunity to join and start schooling. And we are still into the same mode where classes are being taken either through television or either through WhatsApp video calls or through other video call means. So there is an induced or a forced non-enrollment among the youngest section students, particularly for rural India. The second part, which is of more concern, as what Comrade Shivdasan have pointed out, is for the secondary students. So what we are seeing is that the reported level of non-enrollment has come down. That is, out of earlier in 2018-19, roughly around 17 students were dropping out in the age group of 15-16. Now it has come down to 10. However, the reasons behind dropout that existed, a financial constraint, engaging in economic work or engaging in domestic work for female, that didn't went away. So the hypothesis that we are making through this report is this, that since lockdown, the reasons of dropout being financial constraint or engaging in economic activity, that didn't go away. But you can be an online student and still work in the informal workforce, which doesn't get captured in the data. Therefore, staying at school doesn't anymore mean that you have to be a full-time student, because you can actively seek work in your informal workforce. And from all our lived experiences in cities and elsewhere, we are seeing that the age group of the Zomato delivery personnel or someone who is doing deliveries at doorsteps, the age group being simply 15 to 18, and that might be increasing. So work, at one hand, work itself is lacking, and whatever work is available, student now in this lockdown or in this blended mode doesn't stop you from seeking work. And therefore the non-enrollment that is somewhere being seen as something of a achievement of this lockdown is not happening in the correct essence of participating in education. The final chapter, I'll just wrap up with the final result, and which is concerning most of us, is that there is an invisible burden, particularly for students who are belonging to the marginalized sections in India. In 2018, we have seen that students who are pursuing higher education among scheduled tribe and scheduled caste students, only 39% of those students who were studying in public institutes received stipends. So roughly around 60 to 61% didn't have any fellowship or stipends. And in this particular lockdown, which have induced no lack of livelihood opportunities for the socially marginalized section, it is more likely that there has been forced drop out from, or there's been a forced situation where they're induced to step out of their dream of pursuing education, more likely that there is an invisible burden which is not captured largely in the data that is publicly available data that is with us. But prior to this survey, we were in 2019, there's a Time News survey that was conducted by the Ministry of Statistics Program Implementation, where we have seen between this age group 18 to 30 years, for male student, it is less than 25 minutes of domestic work, unpaid domestic work, which includes care work, which includes doing unpaid reproductive labor in household. And for female students, this was roughly around 2.5 hours to 3 hours. This might have increased more. And if you remember that one of the major reasons that was cited as a reason of dropout prior to the pandemic was that engaged in domestic activity was one of the important reasons for female dropout right after the secondary education. So that must have widened. And finally, I'll end with this particular point, and would love to your questions and comments from comrades, is that it's an illustrative example that we have prepared in this report once it's made public. So in 2018-19 periodic labor force survey, what we have seen is roughly for a scheduled caste rural casual worker who earns daily wages, the monthly wage was something around 5,900 rupees, a little higher, 6,500 rupees in the urban sector. So what we are seeing now, in order to participate in education from such a family where a single bread earner is a casual worker, you at least need to buy, be it Jio, Vodafone or Airtel, need to buy a 300 rupee per month internet pack, which means you have to forego 5% of your monthly income, given it was a normal year. Given it's a pandemic year, your incomes have halved, and many such reports of Azim Premji University State of Working Indian, it has shown there's a loss in income, there's a loss in livelihood. So the incomes have halved. So roughly around 5 to 10% of a poor casual worker has to be given up in order for their next generation to participate in education. So this is exactly what is user fee in public education that is now being introduced. And if that person has to buy a new smartphone, I'm assuming the least cost of a smartphone is rupees 3,000. So someone who earns 5,900 in a normal year monthly has to give up roughly around 50% of their monthly income at least once during this lockdown when there was no work for 4 to 5 months. And this is the excess burden that this lockdown that has added to the socially marginalized section in our country in terms of education. So what national education policy wants to push forward is the individualization of a social problem. This is how neoliberalism works, that something that is a state responsibility is now solely a responsibility of a poor working class member. And if that is being propounded as a new normal, we as a collective in Indian Researcher, this report, we are saying this is no normalcy at all, and digital blended modes of education is no alternative. The call should be for free and mass vaccination of students and teachers with utmost and strictest deadlines, and as early as possible the classroom should open in order to resist such commercialization of education. And we need to reclaim education as our right. Just and progressive education as a right for every Indian student must be coherently brought forward into the policy forums. So I'll stop here. I'll thank you everyone. Thanks, Diksha, and over to.
Thank you, Shom, because we finally were able to see the presentation. We could actually see the presentation. It was really well done. I think what you told is it's very important. That it is at the end of the day how the state want us to see this problem is an individual problem, individualization of a problem, and slowly taking a back step towards from their responsibility as a service provider, as someone who was supposed to give education, job, which should be the primary necessity of any citizen. So I think that is the political crux of the report. If anybody has any question on this, I think we can ask. If Comrade Nitish had to add something, Comrade Nitish can do. After that, I think we will we'll conclude our session with Comrade VP Sanu and Comrade Mayuk Vishwas, where we not only talk about the data and the number, but as student community, as student organization, what are the works that you're going to do, a future guideline of it. So if Comrade Nitish has to add, or he has to ask something to Comrade Shoham, he can.
There is nothing to add. First of all, I congratulate the team Indian Researcher for taking up such an important task and bringing these facts out. I hope this will be read widely and discussed not only among students but also with a larger community. And also I request Comrades Soham and Deepshita to write some articles out of this which we can publish in other medias also. Especially I request to give us an article for the student struggle to carry on this. And it's a very comprehensive and detailed report. And as Comrade Sivadasan also mentioned, it is actually a institutionalization of the discrimination. That is what's happening. There is a proper institutionalization. Already it is discriminatory. Already the system is exclusionary. But the pandemic has intensified this institutionalization of discrimination and also marginalization. So this fact should go out. Students have been hit worse. Among students, the marginalization has been discriminated and been dropped out heavily. 2 days back, a parliament report answer to the question raised by Comrade Sivadasan is widely reported by the media in last 2 days, that a huge section of the students have been dropped out from the campuses during this phase. Among them, the proportion of the students from SC, ST, other backward communities are huge. Or it's literally a war is going on the people, and pandemic is just another episode which has intensified that war. It's time we come together, form a broader unity with all the people who are affected by this discriminatory policies and fight this regime and system. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Nitish. I'll request Comrade Sanu to give your remark on the report presented and give the future call. After that, we'll come to you.
So, anyway, greetings to all comrades who are watching this live, and congratulating the comrades who behind this report, our Indian researcher research team. They've done a very good job. From across the country, they collected data and done a very good report. Anyway, I think it will lead our movement also, because this is the problem what students facing, they identified. Now, this is the role of our student movement to fight against the government policies and against the issues what becoming increasing the dropout ratio and everything. Anyway, we are fighting a long time for the reservation and other issues. And this also, in this pandemic also, the economically backward and socially marginalized people, they affected it very much. So the thing in that report, I was looking after that says in first, I think in first lockdown time, that time we had this Facebook Live. That time we said it because if with the minimum income, what the parents will purchase, smartphone or dal and rice? That's the main question. So because this in this report says for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and other people also, almost their 55, 54, 50, more than 50% of their income, how to spend for smartphone and data. That is another problem also. So these issues are increasing, and inside Parliament with Comrade Shivadathan and other MPs, they are fighting, and outside that we have to fight. Anyway, on this issue also, we will have some. We have some concrete ideas, and we will do some agitations, and about these agitations and other programs which we have to take in the near future, that Comrade Mayub will mention here. He will announce some other agitation programs here, and we have to go ahead. And in this pandemic, some reports are coming. I didn't get the report from all states, but the increase of suicide rate is increasing. So one thing, that suicide which is reported, that is means that is reported. More than cases, that suicide cases are not reporting, and so many suicide attempts from students that are not reporting. So the suicide tendency is increasing among students. Students means child, because up to higher secondary, up to secondary, so many students from upper primary and lower primary students also committing suicide, and because of they have that stress because of the schools are shut down and other problems from houses and society, everything. The main victims of this pandemic, that is, we can clearly say that is students. So against that thing, we have to fight. I am concluding. Anyway, once again, I am congratulating the Student Struggle Research, Indian research team to bring up a very good report. Okay, thank you.
Dipshita, you are mute.
Thank you so much, Comrade Sanu. I would now request Comrade Mayub Biswas, General Secretary SFI, to conclude our today's publication program, and also, as Comrade Sanu has mentioned, to announce the pause that we have taken. We have taken the decision of. So over to you, Comrade. Mayub, you have to unmute. You're mute. You're muted. No. No, Comrade Mayub, you're not audible. I mean, you're muted. Just plug in. I can't. You can remove the earphone maybe एक बार. Earphone टा खुले एक बार ये करो. ना, no sound. মানে ফোনটা ইয়ারফোনটা ফোন থেকে খুলে একবার বলো. Can anybody else hear Comrade Mayub, or am I the only one who is not able to hear? Shom?
No, he's on mute only. I also can't hear him.
Mayub, you are not audible. একবার বলো দেখি.
So maybe Dipshita, you can start with the call and Mayukta can rejoin once, if that is fine. Or
Mayub একবার তুমি বেরিয়ে আসো. Sorry. I think we have been speaking in Bangla in between. I think out of excitement, so I think comrades won't take it in a other way. So as Comrade Sanu has mentioned, Comrade Nitish has said, and also the foundation that Comrade Shivdasan, while he was speaking, he told that when Indian Researcher was formed, there was an idea that what we want to do with it, whether we just want to be academics who does their academic, or whether we want to be activists who only do activism. We thought there should be a space where both can be done. So the people who are inside the movement, people who have a vision to change this society, would be able to contribute academically. I think we got back Comrade Moimata.
Now,
I'll
is
ask
it
Comrade
audible,
Moimata to take-
Dipshita?
Perfect.
Dipshita, it's fine, huh? Okay. Okay, then I'd like to congratulate, I'd like to thank our viewers for watching this show for a long time. And at the same time, I'd like to thank our MP, Comrade V. Sivdasan. And because Comrade Sivdasan has also already raised some issues, some important issues regarding the student problems during this lockdown. And we also get some reply from the government, and it also showed how this government is using this pandemic situation as an opportunity. And it showed that in its report also, it reflected the pathetic condition of the student community, especially during this pandemic situation. And SFI, from the very beginning, we are talking about the dropout rates, we are talking about the gender inequality, we are talking about this digital divide, and of course, this government, this Manuwadi government, they are trying to use this pandemic to destroy the marginalized section of our country, the SC, ST students of our country, the minority students of our country. And these reports also reflected such incidents. And that is why what we are saying that now we have to launch a program, continuously protest program we have to launch. And that is why the day after tomorrow, on 12th of August, the foundation day of the organized student movement. We have planned from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Kutch to Kohima. Everywhere, the SFI units will organize mock group to protest against this digital divide, to protest against the attack on the students. And we also demand the vaccination for all students because it is very important to reopen universities, our campuses. And as you know, the companies, online apps companies, educational companies like Vaiju, like Unacademy, they are getting huge amount of profit during this period. While the people, Comrade Sanu has already mentioned how the students from the marginalized section, they are suffering. And especially this mental health problem is increasing in our country rapidly. So we have to address this. Already our students in the different corners, they are already protesting against the policies of the central government. And you also see that government is so much reluctant. They are not going to hear our comrades, our students. So this is the time we have to take our voice in front of the parliament, inside the parliament, what Comrade V. Sivdasan, Comrade MPs like Comrade V. Sivdasan are doing. At the same time, we have to take these rights, the fighting, into the streets. And that is why on the 12th of August, we have launched this program. We have to take this program in every corner of our country. Again, I like to thank our team, our Indian researcher team, because this is very important for us right now to emphasize the really what is happening in reality. Because in the most of the mainstream media, which is funded by these corporates, and which is already we know this corporate and Hindutva nexus, how they are trying to destroy our country. And that is why we have mentioned that it's very important for us to research, and this is also experience because what we believe SFI and study and struggle, and without study we can't go forward. We have to learn. We have to learn what is happening in our country, the pathetic situation of the students. We have to emphasize it in a very concrete manner, and that is why with this data we'll make a press conference again, and we'll tell the whole country what is the real situation of our students. So again, I'd like to thank all of you, all the viewers, and of course Indian researcher team for their excellent effort and this brilliant effort. I'd like to thank all of you again I just want to hand it over to Comrade Deepshita. Thank you, Comrade.
Thank you, Comrade Mayuk. Thank you, Comrade Soham. Thank you, Comrade Sanu. Thank you, Comrade Nish, and of course, our guest today, Comrade P. Sitasu, for giving us this time. And as Comrade Mayukda has said, that the 12th of August, we are going to launch mock classroom everywhere. So it's not only about giving the data, but also finding the solution. So let us continue our fight inside our classrooms, inside the parliament, and also in the streets. So I want to thank everyone again. I hope that we come with more such reports next time very quickly. Till then, thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks for staying here, patiently listening to us. It had been a long, it's almost 1 hour that people are listening to us. Thank you so much for the participation. With that, we are concluding our program today. Inkilab Zindabad.